You're listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. With the help of successful individuals across industries, Dirk breaks down the unknown parts of every vocation while highlighting the importance of finding a career where you can leverage your natural skills, passions, and interests. Now here's your host, Dirk Nevelle.
Hey everybody, this is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me today is a friend of mine, Walter Young. Welcome, Walter.
Thanks for having me, Dirk.
Yeah, man, I love the background there. We were talking a little bit about it before, but tell the audience real quick what that background is.
Well, CTP is a financial planning firm, and oftentimes, we'll just tell people on Thursdays we're going to have a little coffee talk, and so they came up with literally a coffee background. And so sometimes I joke with people, let's grab a coffee, and this is my background.
All right, it makes me want to have a cup. To be honest, I love it. So Walter's a friend. It's funny. I met Walter. Gosh, I don't know if there's through Nate or I think it was through Nate years ago. And Walter is going to talk to us today a little bit about the insurance world, the business. And that's actually the industry that I thought about getting into multiple times, more on the property and casualty side. But I'm excited to have you on. I know there's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. Maybe we can just start with your own words. Tell me kind of what your background is and what you do in the insurance industry.
Yeah, so my technical background is I have an MBA in finance. I worked for Deloitte Consulting for a handful of years in business consulting. And if any consultant knows that if you ever want to see your family, you have to leave. And so, I was on a plane Monday to Friday for years. And eventually it just was too much. And so as I was looking around for another industry to move into, the financial planning industry kind of mirrored a little bit what the corporate finance side of things or the strategy side that we were doing at Deloitte. And it also kind of really drew upon that MBA background that I have. And one of the theories I have, one of the kind of philosophies I align myself with is that, at home, we are just a small business, right? We should operate ourselves with some of the same principles that we find in well-run businesses. And so that I kind of just use that as my philosophy to evolve over time. And the insurance world, was something that I thought I would have a competitive advantage because in a weird way, the way I use life insurance is so much different than the average life insurance that I think I carved out my blue ocean from kind of just the classic, life insurance, term insurance kind of stuff, right? It's really more geared around, maximizing retirement income planning by using insurance and investments together, which I'm sure we'll get into. But so that was kind of my entry point. And I've been doing this, 15, 17 years since. Now I have an RICP, which is Retirement Income Certified Professional, because I really spend a lot of time thinking about retirement income planning, because that's a really hard part of financial planning.
Okay, so for somebody that's a little green, it's new, maybe their dad or their mom was in the insurance world. You made a comment before we hit record about being a dying breed. Can you kind of get into that a little more?
Yeah, life insurance, if you think about your grandparents, life insurance, what they used to call it the noble profession, right? Actually, that was the title, was being a noble profession. And back in the old days, right, before Wall Street really took over, your insurance person, your banking person really was the focus of a lot of financial planning, because the average person just didn't buy investments, right? They didn't exist, right? There weren't ETFs back in the day, or even mutual funds aren't even that old. And so a lot of personal financial planning revolved around banks and insurance companies, right? You had a pension, you had a life insurance policy, you had an annuity, and those were the products of that time period. And slowly over time, we know that the investment world has kind of come in, and there's lots of philosophical reasons why that may be good or bad, but it's really come in to take over that space. And the life insurance companies just have not kept up with the advertising and really kept up with the times. And so we're seeing that the people who are life insurance focused are really aging. And sadly, I'm one of the young guys now. And so I think it's a little bit of a dying breed. I'm part of this group called the Forum 400, which is supposedly the 400 best producers in the country. And as we look around, we're just kind of shocked by how old the room is. And we're just not attracting young people for life insurance centric solutions. They're going more towards, the investment side of the house, where there's maybe better economics, maybe better reputations, or at least things that are easier for people to deal with and digest.
So, in real simple terms, like I remember when I first got into the working world, a buddy of mine was calling me, and I bought term life insurance, which is very cheap life insurance. So you die, and X amount of dollars goes to you, your wife or your family or whatever. And then there's more complicated insurance. So when you were starting out, were you like a term guy, or did you do all of the above?
No, I really came in on the permanent insurance side of the house, simply because I understood from a financing and academic, I had a different level of understanding how life insurance could fit into an overall financial plan. And term insurance is critically important. Everyone should have it. It's cheap. It's easy. It's a no-brainer, especially if you have a family. But life insurance is really a misunderstood vehicle. And I think, one of my favorite quotes by Einstein actually is, if a goldfish measures itself by its ability to climb a tree, it will be forever disappointed. And the reason I use that is simply because I think we measure life insurance in the wrong ways. And so, of course, it doesn't stand up to investments and things that we compare it against to. It's not what it's for. But when you measure it or use it for what it really is for, it becomes a very powerful option. And so that was kind of my specialization that I got into the industry with, was to really understand how to kind of use life insurance solutions in conjunction with everything else, right? Life insurance is never the star of the show, right? It's always Robin to Batman, right? Life insurance should not be the centric. It's not, it's not the main focus. But man, without it, you lose a lot of choices and options and benefits, in terms of a financial plan.
Yeah. So again, I mean, for someone younger or somebody that's not too dialed in on this, when you're talking about you work with a financial institution that manages your assets, your 401k, your stock, your mutual funds, whatever, right? So that's something that's hopefully growing and it's evolving over time. And then on the insurance side, I think the stereotype or the mindset is everyone associates that with this is something I pay for if I'm not around or something happens. But that's not very true, right? When it comes to more of the complicated applications or products that you're involved with. Can you try to, I mean, I know it's hard to a younger audience, but I think term life insurance is really easy to understand, but can you kind of get into kind of what the benefits are and why somebody should consider some of the products that you offer versus throwing it all on Apple?
Yeah, we'll kind of start. One thing about life insurance, it's a layering effect, right? Any one benefit of the life insurance policy is fine, but it may or may not be, the reason why you do it. So of course, if we have term insurance, which is cheap, and we could buy a similar amount of insurance, of permanent insurance, and it's expensive, there better be a whole good reasons why you would pay the extra money, right? Or you would just always buy the term insurance. And generally, it is around the tax deferral of the buildup of the policy, meaning that there's a savings account, a cash value that's associated with the life insurance policy that is going to be, it's a non-correlated asset, meaning it doesn't move up and down with the markets. It's a constant growth vehicle. It's off the tax grid, so you never have to pay tax on it. The life insurance comes with also long-term care protection. So as people get older, they like the idea that they can use it for their long-term care benefit. It's an asset that you can use before retirement. So I don't have to wait till I'm 59 and a half to pull money out of my policy. It's something that's not included on college calculations for financial aid. It has an ability for me to borrow money out of the policy so that I don't have to disrupt my assets if I have an emergency or opportunity, right? We forget that sometimes maybe I want to buy there's a property that's, that has a really good deal to it and I need a down payment for it. Well, where am I going to get the money? I have to either sell an asset that maybe I wish I didn't have to sell, or I have to go into debt to get it, or maybe I have this midpoint, which is this cash value that I can use, for those kind of financing stopgaps. But the real benefit of life insurance is when we get to retirement, in that it's a supporting mechanism to the investments that you do have. And what I mean by that is when we get to retirement, the distribution side of our financial life is the exact opposite of the accumulation side. So when we were young and we're putting money into our 401ks over time, dollar cost averaging, putting amounts of money in over long periods of time, we're okay if the markets go down. In fact, it's a good thing when the markets go down because we buy more shares. And so when the market comes back around again, we actually have more wealth. Well, that exact opposite happens at retirement time. So when I'm pulling money out of my retirement accounts and the market goes down, I suffer two losses, right? I have the market loss, and then I have the withdrawal that I had to take to live on. And so the problem is that the markets rarely rebound fast enough to get me back to where I should have been or what my projection was at the beginning of this. And so by having a pot of money that I can access when markets are negative, then I can let my asset base rest and let it come back again, because typically markets after a couple, 3 years begin to become positive again. And so by just having the ability to buffer those handful of years, I can smooth out my retirement ride, and I actually extend my asset base longer than if I just did the markets, right? So in a more technical conversation, people may have heard of what's called the 4% rule, right? And the 4% rule is just a rule of thumb. We don't have to get into the details of how it came about, but the rule of thumb basically says that when I get to retirement, I could take my asset base, call it $1 million, multiply it by 4%, and that's the income that I can expect to take out of it with an inflation bump to it each year. And so that 4% rule has persisted for a long time. People argue whether it's 3 or 4% today based on interest rates and longevity, right? Because we're living longer. But the idea is that we're capped at this 4% rule, which means in order for me to have $100,000, I need millions of dollars in retirement funds to make that happen. And for the average person, that may be a challenge. And so when you sit down with your financial planner and you're saying, look, I don't think I have the income I'm hoping for, then they give me 4 options. You can save more money, which can be challenging. You could take more risk in hoping to grow your asset base more, but a lot of times at retirement, you're really trying to reduce the risk. You could work longer, which many people are starting to turn towards, but we don't always get to choose our retirement date, right? Sometimes companies just let us go. Sometimes our health lets us go, right? So we can't always assume we get to work till we're 65 or 70. And then the fourth option, which unfortunately lots of people turn to, is just begin to live on less, right? They begin to let go of their retirement dreams. This is when I hear that people start saying, well, we don't need to go out to dinners. We don't need to take trips, right? And they start to really reduce all the things they'd hoped they would have because they're realizing that they're not going to get to this pot of money that they need. But what most people don't understand is there's a fifth option, which is the name of the book I wrote, the fifth option, which shows us that there are different strategies to improve upon that 4% withdrawal rate. So the limiting factor is the 4%, because we have to always worry about whether or not next year the markets are the negative years. But if I don't have to worry about that, then I can actually take more money out of my accounts confidently, which means that my retirement income goes up. And so the book goes into some suggestions and some ideas and examples of how to do that. But life insurance is the beginning, it's the gateway, it's the product that lets me even have those conversations for that higher retirement income stream.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening and I'm 53, so I've got a bit of life under my belt. But I'm thinking about a younger person who's like, whoa, this is a lot. And I'm thinking some of the things they might be thinking about. So like one question I would have, I'll throw a couple questions or a couple things at you and you can kind of address them. One is like how a young person would get into this line of work. You mentioned, I think before we hit record, that a lot of the insurance folks are kind of getting morphed into, I don't know, financial services, and now they're starting to sell the same products. So is a better route getting into like a financial services company? The other one is kind of the skill sets that you might share that you have made you successful, because I know that you're really good at what you do. I remember before I met you, I was referred to you and heard a lot of praise about your abilities in this industry. So maybe talk a little bit about what you think would make a good person in your industry. And then I'd be kind of curious, since there's so much change, like in my mind, I'm thinking there's this battle between Walter, the insurance guy, and then the client's financial person. And it feels like there's, I don't know, tug of war, a little bit of a, like this person saying you should do this and you got to, so it could be kind of confusing for somebody who's like, is insured. Because I've been in situations where my financial people have told me I wouldn't do that product, that insurance product, but I see the benefits. So I don't know, take whichever one of those you want to go down. But
let's start with the last one first, which is probably the most important one, which is there absolutely is polarization in the financial services markets, right? And some of that comes down simply to what products are sold at the firms, right? So if you don't sell life insurance, guess what you don't recommend? You don't recommend life insurance. If you can only sell life insurance, guess what you recommend? You always recommend life insurance. And I think with the research coming out from the American College of Financial Planning and all the academic world is the power is in the merger of these two disciplines, right? Either side is incomplete. Typically, the investment side is much more growth oriented, and it is, right? There's no better investments typically than markets, right? But their distribution is limiting, and it doesn't have the guarantees and the floors and the things as we get older we would like to have, right? In a perfect world, we'd have a pension that was equal to the lifestyle we want, right? That'd be a perfect world. But since we don't have that, we have to decide how much risk are we willing to take in order to have that income, goals or that lifestyle. And so each side of the house is going to say, take the risk, don't take the risk. But the reality is the client needs to decide because it's their life. And so I think if we can merge these two disciplines together, the clients will be benefited by doing that. So the idea is we need to build a bridge so that it's not just don't ever do this or always do this. It's understand the math behind it and then make a choice that fits your lifestyle, right? I think a lot of advisors really inject their own bias into the retiree's life when it doesn't belong there. If you love risk and I don't, it's not for me to try to talk you out of risk. It's for you to be able to show you what the risk is and make sure you understand it. Or if you don't like risk, it's not my job to tell you should be in risky things, right? We have to just kind of educate clients and they'll tell us what it is that they're looking for, because you can create income streams with lots of different ways, right? And with different kinds of products. And so I think we get caught up on this either or scenario. I think as a young person coming up, to be really successful, you have to have a little bit of salesmanship. You have to be able to really, talk and articulate and not be afraid of going out there and having conversations. But I think it also benefits you if you have a little bit of math behind you, because some of these conversations can get very mathematical. And so when we're looking at different scenarios, right, and we're going through the different outcomes, it's really helpful to know the math behind it as to why that's the case. Because, especially living in the Seattle area, there's plenty of engineers that will come up with their own spreadsheets that are pretty darn impressive, right? And so you better know some of the math that's behind it that they're doing. And I think alongside that is, a good mentorship is really important, because there is a lot of risk, there is a lot of compliance, there is a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into if you're just doing this by yourself and trying to navigate it, along the way. So having someone that you have good, really good trust with, and you feel has a good reputation, has a good ability to teach you, I think is really important. It's probably not just unique to this industry, but I think if you go back to the 1900s, you had apprenticeships and you had master class people, right? And they kind of learned that trade as they moved up, and we kind of lost that with the Industrial Revolution, where we all just became, cogs in a machine. But I think some of these services, going back to that apprenticeship, don't be afraid to be a good apprentice for a while, because I think it really will short circuit the learning curve over the long run.
So what is the future? Is it these financial services companies are starting to go all in on insurance? And no?
Nope, they're not. But I think that as the research starts to come out, I think there'll be a reckoning of the fact that, we have to see, these new philosophies at least be talked about. But again, when you're in the ivory tower and just producing these papers, it doesn't get to the average person, and it barely gets to the average advisor, right? Because they're consumed with kind of what their companies and their philosophies are teaching them. You kind of have to go outside some of that in order to get some of the advice or the research that's so hopefully is objective and neutral. But there's still a very good there's a very good division between insurance-based solutions and non. We'll see as people retire and have more risk, or feel that there's more risk to their retirements. We might see attitudes change by the consumer, saying, I don't want to be whipsawed on a yearly basis based on the markets. I want some predictability. I want some ability to have the ability to plan my expenses without worrying. And so as those conversations become articulated, we may realize that there's a place for all of these tools.
So the products you deal with, they don't all deal with death, correct?
Correct. So, for example, an annuity is the opposite of that, right? So life insurance you put into a product until you die. And annuities, you put money in and you take it out until you die, right? You get a payment until you die. So they're kind of the polar opposites of each other. And so, that's why they can work so well. So, in terms of their solution sets, and they can really bolster a good portfolio, right? They can really do a good job of helping push the income that a person might get had they just had one solution or the other.
Got it. So you said you're one of the young guys, and you're probably close. I think you and I, we've talked about this. We're close to the same age.
Yeah.
So what the heck's going on with the demographics of early 20s, mid 20s to early 50s? Like, are there just not many people that are signed up? I mean, that are in this world of insurance? I mean, I would think that would be a big problem, or maybe a big opportunity.
Well, I think both. So yes, I think they're coming through the more traditional financial planning shops that are more asset gathering and more portfolio managing, because those are good economics, right? As you build a business, right? They have good revenue streams, and they have a good terminal value where you can sell a company at the end of the day too. And I think where the trick is to make sure that these advisors, there's nothing wrong with that, just that they understand all the financial products that exist, not just the ones that that they're in front of. And there's a big conversation around the fiduciary rule, which is a big thing in our industry, which is the fiduciary standard is making sure you're always doing the best for your client, right? As if it was you. How would you treat yourself? That's how you treat the client. And a lot of that argument revolves around commissions, right? And insurance right now still is a commission-based product for the most part. And so some people who call themselves fiduciaries will say that we can only be a fiduciary if we don't sell commission-based products, right? Because therefore there would be no incentive for us to ever think that we would bring this product in because of a commission. The other side of the fence is saying, well, how can you be a fiduciary if you don't even offer everything that exists, right? What if this product is something that they need? What if long-term care is an important part of their financial planning? Are you just going to say, sorry, you'll have to take that risk? So I think, hopefully the new financial planning people that are coming in really can take a look at all the options and understand that to do a good job for a client, you must consider all of them and rule ones in and rule ones out, and hopefully agnostic to the way you get paid. But I think you'll also see that financial products will move away from commissions in the long run, that life insurance, annuities eventually will be more fee-based or be more in line with the way financial planning is done today.
Okay.
So you see kind of a commission, a sunset in some of those commission products over time.
Let's do, I also like to kind of get into compensation, and I'm not asking you, Walter, to show us your W-2, what you make, but I do want to get into kind of how somebody is paid in your world. Just so people kind of, I don't really even when I got into this business, 23 years ago, I never really thought about kind of you're starting over every month in the mortgage world versus my buddies that are in insurance or financial services where you build a book of business. But can you maybe talk a little bit about the nature of compensation in your industry?
Yeah. So life insurance is sold, and there's a commission associated based on how much insurance you buy, right? And so, and there's different ways to configure the insurance that minimizes some of those commissions. There's other options where the commissions are larger, but it's by and large it's based on the death benefit amount that you purchase, right? Now we won't get into all the complexities of all the minutia that goes into it, but by and large that's what it is. And then after that there is a trailing commission that's really built to help make sure you're incented to service the person, right? So it's not just a transaction. Because it doesn't do anybody good if someone buys a life insurance policy and then abandons it 3, 4, 5 years later, right? Life insurance is a long-term product and it gets better over time. So we really want to make sure that someone is able to monitor it, make sure that it's performing right, and that it ultimately does what it's supposed to do, right? Which is pay somebody on your deathbed, right? So there's that commission. Annuities are the same thing, right? Annuities come with a commission based on how big the annuities and the type of annuity. Some annuities pay out a lot more than others. Some annuities have trails, some don't. So there's kind of a portfolio of things when it comes to the annuity world, but it's not as trail friendly as the financial services part, where you're charging 1% on a portfolio or something like that. Through thick and thin, and as you build up your business, you have this large renewal base at the end of each year. But life insurance does have the ability to have a nice enough renewal to it that you're not starting over at zero every single year. Kind of like maybe the mortgage business does.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this because I think this is, I like money. I like freedom with money, and I don't like being capped, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you, like, when you use the word trail, I've always used the word recurring revenue, book of
Mhm.
business. But in the world of different sales types of careers, you can sell like mortgages where you get paid when the loan funds and you're done. Hopefully you're doing more, referral business and you're just continuing to be busy every month. In Walter's world, in the insurance, financial services, I've got buddies in property casualty insurance. They're building a book of business that they essentially get paid on every year. So if you have a large client and they go away, you don't get paid on it. Are there other recurring revenue sales careers that you're aware of, or would you say the insurance and the financial services are it?
I don't know specifically on the corporate side. There could be things where if you're selling licensings, for example,
Yeah.
that there could be a percentage of the licensing that continues. I know in the recruiting world that as long as someone has a job, you get a percentage of their hourly rate that continues, and as long as they keep going. So there probably are other examples where there's some sort of benefit to it. But obviously the financial services is pretty well known for
Yep.
building that income up. Property casualty, another great example. Different economic models, but the same concept of having this revenue stream that continues. And that's the equity of your business that you can sell at the end of it. The insurance world is the life insurance is much less regarded and has a lot less of a value to it at the end because it's not the same as a property casualty or the investment management side. But there's some, right? Because the transaction is largely done. So there isn't a lot of more transaction upside from that. It's just really maintaining it or trying to keep it on the books versus the AUM side of the house or the property casualty where you get paid very well to keep that client going, right? And you hope that they stay with you for a long time.
Yeah. Did you think about those things when you got in, like
I
the business?
did, I did, but I honestly don't like the risk, and I didn't want to have to deal with the phone calls and quite. I mean, this is going to maybe sound sheepish, but I didn't want to lose people money. I didn't want to be the reason that something went wrong. And even you
Yeah.
do, I know markets go up and down. I never wanted someone's kid to not go to college because their 529 took a dump in 2008. So I knew that my product was always going to be is guaranteed to grow. Period. I just knew that there was never a year where it wasn't going to be bigger than the year before, and I just needed to teach people how to complement what they're doing. So, like for example, even when a 529 plan, there's volatility there, right? So there could be a year where the market's negative. I use my life insurance policy to pay the college that year and let my 529 plan recover. So I'm not having that same issue where the 529 plan goes down. I take money out to pay for college, and now I have a much smaller amount in there than I had hoped, right? So we can see how we can use these two tools together, for a lot of different things.
One question I'm thinking about is if someone's thinking, interesting, I kind of think the financial could be cool. I think the insurance could be cool. Can you kind of briefly walk us through, like, I know the financial services world, I looked into it years ago as well, and all the tests, and they're not easy tests, right? The series, whatever, I don't even know the names of them. Is it similar in insurance, or is I don't want to use the word easier, but is getting into your world a lot easier than getting into
Yeah, I think
financial
so.
services?
Yeah, it is because insurance products are not securities, right? So all the rules with securities just don't apply. So there's not as many, it's not many, I don't have to learn options. You don't have to learn, how stocks trade. You don't have to understand all the nuances to that stuff that you do on the stock side. But there are tests to get into the life insurance, and it's not hard, but it's not trivial. And it should be, right? There should be some some barrier to entrance to get into these things because you are impacting people's financial lives. But it's nowhere near a Series 7, for example, or a Series 65, like you're mentioning. But then when you're life insurance, you're limited to talking about insurance, right? You don't get to say what stock you should buy or what funds you should be purchasing or those kinds of things, right? You really are like I work in conjunction with those people to put together the full financial plan.
What would you say? What would you say like has made you good at what you do? Like, not to, I know you're a humble guy, but like, Like, why are you good at this business? Like, why have you risen to the top in your world? You mentioned you're one of the top 400 guys nationally. Like, what is it about you that makes you succeed in this industry?
Well, I think one is being a perpetual student, just knowing that you never know enough. You just never know enough. And there's always someone that knows more, is able to share, whether it's how to communicate something or something that's very, code or IRS related, like, something technical. That there's people out there that are brilliant, right? And no matter how good you are, there's someone smarter. And so I've just made it a lifelong lesson that I reinvest in myself every year by going to the conferences, learning facilities. And even if I guess I always approach something that you can't learn less. So even if I'm underwhelmed by certain things, there may be things I will learn that I don't want to do as much as things I learned that I do want to do. And then creating a network around you of people that you really, you kind of hold yourself to the level of professionalism, and, you kind of rise up together in terms of what everybody learns and shares, and is able to communicate that way. I think those were really two important things. And then just having some grit, right? I mean, selling life insurance, no one says that from the top of the mountain that that's what they do, right? It's just, it's a hard thing to say. And so, but you got to have some thick skin to get through those initial kind of side-eye glances until you can get to the math of it, or you can get to the point where you can show it, in an objective way of saying, here's the path you're on. Here's 2 or 3 other options you don't even know exist. But now that you know, pick the one that you feel the most comfortable with. And a lot of the times it does include the insurance world. They just got to know.
The first one you mentioned, I was thinking like your natural interest in learning, right? And knowing more. That would be exhausting if you weren't really into what you're doing. And I'm imagining, and I bring this up because a lot of people are in careers or jobs that they're just burned out and they don't love it. And that's tough. But like, I think what I'm hearing from you is you're naturally interested in the business, the products, whatever you're going every year learning about. Would you say that that's a big part of your success? I mean, you seem like you're not bullshitting, like you're not just going through the motions, like you're truly, maybe on a Sunday night you're in bed and you're reading something about your industry. Is that accurate?
100%. When I'm working out, doing whatever it is. I think my natural calling, I'm kind of becoming more of an evangelical for retirement income planning than anything. And I know that people of wealth get all the attention, and guess what? They're going to be fine, right? What financial planning does for wealthy people is it protects their wealth, tax planning, and then generational planning, right? So they're going to be fine. But there's this swath, it's in middle America, that is on the fence. And right now they don't know whether or not they can retire because they don't really understand how it works. They don't understand, when I have a certain amount of money, what does that mean? How do I get the most of it? How do I have safe, predictable income for as long as I need it to be? And so that's the area that I'm fighting for, right? Which is the people that really still can get there, but they got to learn all of the choices that exist. They have to learn all the strategies, and they don't get exposed to them very often. And then there's, of course, a segment that we can never help, right? But I'm really after that middle ground and trying to figure out how can we educate them? How can we get them to the place where they get their best chance at having the retirement that they've worked so hard for, and maybe elevate them into that level of like, you can go do some of the fun stuff that you thought. I can't tell you how many people that are professionals I hear say, "Well, I'll never retire," because it's not the true. They just don't know how to do it, right? They just don't know even how to even think about it. And I think the financial literacy in America is terrible, right? And so in whatever way I can, I'm trying to push some knowledge out there for people to think differently about how the retirements might work.
What's behind that? Is there something more to it, or is it just as simple as that's a demographic or an audience that really needs help? Or is there more of an emotional, like,
maybe, I mean, my mom was, didn't grow up with much, and she's not from this country. And so, we always had, we were always on the margin for lots of that stuff. And so maybe just growing up with a little bit of this, I don't want to call it scarcity, but certainly having, not having as much as your neighbors did, and just kind of keeping that mindset through, which is, how can we help people, just learn how this is going to be? I mean, you work a long time, And the worst feeling in the world is just not knowing what happens when that income turns off.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see a change in demographics. If you look at the Gen Zs and the millennials, their attitude towards work is changing. They may not have the same retirement date kind of driven thing that we do. Age 65, I'm out of there. They may be that they're in this perpetual working zone, for most of their lives. And we talked about this concept called ikigai, which is this great Japanese philosophy that says, you try to figure out, what am I good at? What does the world need? What does it get paid for? And what do I love? And at the centerpiece of that is ikigai, right? And so if you find at some point that you're in that center, you're not working, right? I mean, that's where you want to be. And a lot of the Japanese folks will tell you that that's their goal, is to get there, because then there is no retirement date, right? You're just doing what you love. And the economics come together, the fulfillment comes together. And I think the Gen Zs and millennials probably do a better job of really starting to investigate that, because they don't have the same financial tools our parents did. There's no pensions. Social Security is a little iffy. They're realizing that for them, it's a little bit harder, right? Buying a house is a little bit harder. Student debt is a little bit harder. So they have to kind of find contentment in a different way, probably.
So can you spell? So I'm going to say Iki, but what is the term again?
Ikigai, Ikigai. And technically, if you think of a Venn diagram, at the top of it is, what do you love? What do you love to do?
Okay.
And the next circle is what the world needs.
Okay.
And the next one, the circle below, is what you can get paid for. Mm-hmm. And then the last circle is, what are you good at? Mm-hmm. And there's these sub-circles, which may be too hard to do on a webinar here, but what you love and what the world needs is a mission. What the world needs and what you get paid for is a vocation. Mm-hmm. What you can get paid for and what you're good at is a profession. And what you're good at and what you love is a passion. And in the center of that is Ikigai. So you can see that when we talk with people, especially younger folks, they're still trying to figure all that out, right? I mean, I have a friend at a large technology company, and they're recognizing for their younger folks, they have to show them the impact they have on the world for them to get excited about it. It's not just about stock options anymore. It's about, what good am I doing? Like, how do I feel about myself and what I'm presenting to the world? So I think the younger folks are really moving in this interesting way of not just putting our head down like maybe Gen X and Boomers did and just work really hard and then try to retire. And that may be a healthy thing or may not. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because that's part of the podcast is I'm trying to have younger people that have a lot of voices in their head. Because when I was Santa Clara, right? Yeah. And University of Washington. And I mean, I was thinking about money. I was thinking about a new car. I was thinking about, sales, right? I was thinking, okay, I'm good with people. I'm not, people like me. I'm honest. I feel like I could represent a product or service, but I was never thinking about like really what I'm naturally came into this world gifted to do. Like, what do I love to do? What energy, what gives me energy? And so with younger adults, I'm always trying to get them to think about the uniqueness of who they are. And, I know sometimes if you love to fish, doesn't mean that's going to be your career. Or if you love to paint, it could just be a passion. But I see people, Walter, we have mutual friends, and it's like sports. There's certain athletes that just separate, right? That are just better. Yeah. I see people in their careers that just separate themselves from people. And oftentimes they're much wealthier and they're much happier, and it's just, there's something about what they're doing that's in alignment with who they are. Mm-hmm. And there's no secret behind that. So that's my hope often with this podcast, is to interview people like you. And, hey, here's Walter on a Sunday night. He might be reading in bed about some insurance product, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's really important to note, because I don't think young adults think like that. And maybe you're right. Maybe they're starting to think like that. I don't know. But I think if you look at how much time you spend working, it's a lot of time. And if you hate your job, I think that's kind of a sad life.
Yeah, for sure. And you can think of these circles as being, some are bigger than others, right? So maybe I'm making more money, but my self-fulfillment or what I'm passionate about is very small. Yeah. And I don't find the ikigai, the proverbial ikigai that way, right? That's when I'm trying to get out of my job. Well, that would tell me I'm out of alignment. But I think when you can look at the youth, you can just look at all the side hustles, right? You can maybe use their side hustle as a proxy for what they really love. And they're trying to develop them into businesses to some degree, as best they can. And some will have upsides, some won't, right? And so maybe you'll always have to do something that's, not your favorite thing to do, but then you go home and have this hobby, that you love to do. And some may blow up into a wonderful business. And then, maybe that's just the lucky person.
Yeah, sometimes it is luck. So when you were coming out of Santa Clara, did you jump right into this industry, or was there?
I went 1991. I started in the financial services, and then I went back and got my MBA, and did some, did the corporate side of that for a while, which is a little bit why I came back into it, because I had some familiarity with it back in the 2000s.
Do you remember why you thought you needed an MBA?
I wanted to learn more about how accounting and finance and some of the hardcore stuff that businesses do, because I was taking on a role at that point where I was doing more kind of corporate accounting, corporate finance kind of thinking. And I figured it would be a good way for me to I was kind of learning on the job. I literally would go to class one night, learn something, and bring it back to the company the next day and say, hey, we should do it like this, and that's when I realized, well, if I do it in the business, I should do it at home like this, right? And so, there's really no separation in my mind between, a corporation and a home, because at the end of the day, they're both should be centered around cash flow. And, and I think one of the big failings of personal financial planning is that it revolves around balance sheets instead of cash flow, right? No CFO brags about their balance sheet for the most part. They brag about their earnings, their cash flow, right? The return to their investors. And when we talk about a big balance sheet, well, that's only good if it turns into cash flow. And I got to know how to do that, or I just have a bag of money that doesn't buy me anything, right? I mean, if I have $1 million buried in the trunk of a car in the desert and I don't have the keys to the car, what gets the $1 million, right? I got to unlock it into cash flow. And the more efficient I do that, the better off I'm going to be, right? And so that's kind of how I began to dovetail my career in terms of that thinking.
So we know what cash flow is, but can you in your own words or to someone who's younger, explain an example of cash flow so they can understand what you're talking about?
Well, I think at the highest level, at some point, you have to replace your earned income, the money you work for, with passive income, money that you don't work for. And if you ever want to retire, that transition has to happen, or you got to keep working. And so as we're saving up this money, just think of savings as future cash flow, right? Money that I'm going to turn into cash flow when I retire or I stop working. And so the efficiency of which I can do that will dictate how well my retirement goes. And so, so that's what I really spend a lot of my time is understanding that efficiency, because companies focus on efficiency most of the time to get their gains, right? We would love sales to go up all the time, but a lot of times it's cost cutting or it's other efficient ways of doing things that adds to the bottom line also. Yeah. And at the home front, I think we don't get those exercises, those examples. And so we land up having a lot of holes in our financial buckets. We just have a leaky bucket, and we think by turning on the faucet more, we'll solve the problem, but not if you have holes in it. And so, kind of a unique capacity I had was to learn some of that stuff at the corporate level and just spot, areas of inefficiencies. And so we could bring those to the household levels too.
I know you love what you do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I heard something. Is there something about your career that you just don't like or you didn't see coming? I mean, not every job career is perfect, right? But if you were just to be super honest and you had a child that was like, hey, Dad, I kind of want to follow in your footsteps. Is there one or two things you might warn him about?
I hate the paperwork. Just paperwork is, there's a lot of paperwork. I mean, I'm talking to you. You know how much paperwork goes in your business. There's paperwork. You have to be really careful about legal and compliance and risk. I mean, there's risk in making a recommendation, right? And you have to make sure that you really feel good about, the recommendations you're making and how it interrelates with the rest of their financial advisors to make sure that you're really adding to a value and not just having discrete transactions that don't work together, right? So I think those would be the two things. I never loved prospect or cold calling. I never loved that part, and so, but I did love, being able to present in front of people, theories and concepts and ways of thinking about it and challenging the norms. and really trying to tell people, there's more ways than and just have this out of the box concepts, right, that we can bring to people. But there's a healthy dose of paperwork and documentations and all that kind of stuff. And then you got to make sure that you understand the ramification of what you're recommending.
Yeah, I will say, when you mentioned that to me before about maybe not the cold calling, but the one thing I like about you a lot, and I think this is important for the audience to take note of, is like you're really an honest guy. Like you're not to me, you're not salesy, you're not full of crap, trying to sell a product or like I trust you, I believe. And I'm sure there's a lot of times where you're telling people that you shouldn't do anything and you should stay put or whatever. And I think if you're looking at, because this is not like you're selling paper clips or rubber bands or a gym membership, like you're dealing with things that can really affect the bottom line of a family. And I think people that are going to consider this as a career, you have to have the authentic, believable, you have to have those characteristics, personality traits where people believe and trust you. And you either got it or you don't. And I don't know how you get. I think you're either born that way or you're not. But I think that's really important if you're considering this line of work.
Yeah, there's a great quote I heard from somebody that said he uses the acronym ACE. You have to have ACE, which is authority, credibility, and exclusivity. Right? You have to have the authority that people will listen to you. You have to have the credibility, the experience that they trust that what they're hoping for. And then exclusivity, that they feel, lucky and special to be part of a community that you work within. And I think, that's really, I think we work hard to get to that level of ACE, and it helps to have the gray hair and the gray beard. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I like the beard. Looks good on you. Mine's all gray. But I like growing a beard because I don't have much on top. So it gives me something to do. Let's see. As we wind down, I was going to ask you about your website. The fifth option is like just to kind of help promote your services. Is if people are interested in you or getting help from you, is that the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I think, a great way is to go to the website. It's called it's thefifthoption.com, all spelled out. And then my book on Amazon is The Fifth Option, right? And so those are great places to start. And you'll start to learn. The Fifth Option is a very simple book, but it's basically my interpretation of some of the white papers that have come out over the years that takes really high level academic thinking, turns into a story, and hopefully unlocks some new ways of thinking about retirement income planning that people hadn't thought of before. And people can agree with it or disagree with it, but you can't ignore the math, right? You can say, I get it, but I don't want to do it this way. And that's fine, right? But I want you to at least have seen it so that's in the consideration set, so that you're choosing from abundance of knowledge instead of just not been exposed to something. As
we finish up, is there anything I haven't asked you or anything you might, advice to somebody that's watching that's kind of, maybe they're struggling, maybe they don't know what the hell they want to do, or they're interested, but they're not sure? Any kind of advice you might leave with our group? Well,
I think there is a little self-reflection when it comes to career of really, there is something I think today where you have to love what you do, but it could take some time to love it because there could be some work to get there. So, you played football, you didn't love two-a-days, but without them, you didn't get to a level of ability that really wins the games, right? But I do think there has to be some inherent curiosity that you have to have. If you're not curious about it, then you probably won't take the time to learn what you need to learn about it. And your first job is never your last one. So, getting in somewhere, learning, and even if you learn it, you don't like it, you learn something, right? And you just kind of move on from there. And then take advantage of your networks. Reach out to us gray-haired folks that have got some time in the saddle and learn about things, and we can give you perspective and then go, network with other vocations and jobs and see kind of what is that really, what at some point, what gets you out of bed? What are you excited about?
I love it. I just thought of something. I think, I probably was 25 and I was interviewing, I think it was the son, HO Sports, I think Herb O'Brien, I don't know, it was water skis and all these different products. And he was really cool. And I interviewed with him and he was asking me what the number one the most important part of being successful in sales, and he said it was enthusiasm. And I think, enthusiasm, if it's genuine enthusiasm, I think that's another thing, is if you're naturally enthusiastic about something, or it attracts you or interests you, or you're reading magazines, or you're watching YouTube, whatever so I think that's important to note, right? Because kind of just look at what takes up your day and where you're spending time. And I think that's going to lead you somewhere. But anyway, I really appreciate your time, Walter. I think that, here's my take on ending. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in the world of insurance. You talk about being a dying breed, but I don't think this is, a product or a service that's going away. And I feel like, there's a lot of opportunity for younger adults to kind of get into this.
Yeah, I agree. It's ready for some young people to get in and be excited about it, because it's not talked about enough. It just isn't.
Cool. All right, man. Have fun in your coffee shop.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dirk.
All right, take care.